Hello, I'm Ross Tayler, your host and guide for Sacred Sundays, a space to slow down, tune in, and return to what's sacred within and around you. I'm also a life coach for empaths and sensitive souls, walking alongside those who are ready to come home to who they actually are. These conversations are part of fulfilling that purpose, a collective exploration of what it means to live in connection with the sacred. Some weeks you'll hear a sound-based offering to open the space. Other times we'll simply begin in conversation. However it unfolds, this is an invitation into presence, connection, and the beauty of the unseen. If these conversations find you, please subscribe, rate, and share so others can find their way here. Pour a cup of tea, settle in, and let's begin. Today on Sacred Sundays, our guest is Darrell Greenwood. Darrell is a passionate advocate for health, wellness, and intentional living. With a strong connection to nature and a hands-on approach to learning, Darrell brings grounded, practical knowledge into everything he does. Whether supporting community initiatives, working alongside others in wellness spaces, or contributing to meaningful projects that promote balanced living. Known for his steady presence and genuine nature, Darrell values hard work, authenticity, and building strong connections with those around him. He plays an integral role behind the scenes, helping bring ideas to life and supporting ventures rooted in health, growth, and community. Darrell is also the author of a multidimensional storybook called Lantern on the Longship. Welcome to Sacred Sundays, Darrell.
Wow, thank you so much, Ross.
So good to have you, and I appreciate that you're making the time to have this conversation. And I think I met you last July, at the Nanaimo Wellness Fair.
Right.
Yeah, and I had a table there, and I ran into your wife, Katie, who I've known since, well, I think at least 1999, which is kind of wild to think that was 27 years ago.
Wow. Yeah, synchronicities.
I get the feeling that you're no stranger to synchronicities.
No, not at all. In fact, you're in the flow of life when synchronicities are happening on a regular basis.
So let's start with Lantern on the Longship, because it's really a fascinating, uniquely presented autobiography, right?
Yeah.
And what would you like to say about that?
Well, ever since I was small, I always feel like the reality that we're presented is a very small piece of the picture. And I wanted to bring some of my experiences to life that kind of show the highly sensitive nature combined with imagination, vision, passion, and just really bring these stories to life, and with the hope of inspiring others and maybe reaching others that are like, the premise was to reach others that might be having a lot of shadow work appear in their lives. I'm really passionate on the inner healing path, and I kind of feel like the vision I keep having is I can go into the early traumas of my life and not get pulled into it again, just because I can, go deep into it and travel into these shadows and then come out and tell the story and hopefully share wisdom that's going to really profoundly affect others. And then be able to transmute the consciousness that reappears, when you're writing deeply into the shadow and stuff like that, through the modalities of like movement and breath work and meditation, and then continually looking to evolve and grow and expand.
One of the things that really struck me about the stories is your remembrance of the gifts that you had as a child, and being able to connect to that and stay connected to that throughout your life, and revive those gifts. What would you say about that?
Yeah, I'd say there was like a big part of my life where it was hard to relate to the world. So as a kid, and even as a teenager and a young adult, I was attempting to like put those sensitivities, like put the flame out. Which leads to lots of learning. Like, I'm grateful for that because I got into playing sports and I wanted to kind of toughen myself up and be able to relate to other kids and people in this reality. But there was a big part of me that was like needing to be alone and really needing guidance into how to tap into more of like the inner gifts.
Right.
So they were there, and no matter what I did, I couldn't get rid of them. And I kind of learned to navigate through life by playing, like really just getting out and playing out in nature. And I write stories about that in the book. And playing in the snow and playing with animals and really learning how to harness these gifts, not knowing what they would turn out to or how they'd be used in the world. But yeah, just generally getting to an authentic place of like, okay, this is there, and growing into it. I got into more of my late 80s and early 50s and really diving into the inner healing path at about 36. I'm turning 50 in June, so it's been a solid like 14 or 15 years of real committed healing.
And you've mentioned it a few times, even just now, but you refer to yourself as having been extremely sensitive. And I always wonder about that, because for those of us that go through the world, and I was definitely very sensitive as a child as well, it's like, at what point did you realize that? Because it's kind of like that idea of the fish being out of water, it doesn't know water until it's out of water. But how did you know that there was a difference about you, or how did you reconcile that?
Well, it starts when you're really young and you can go into a room and you can feel the energy of the room without anybody saying anything. It's like having like a static in the background that you can't get rid of. So that was like the very first signpost of being in like environments that were like really overstimulating, and being a young kid and going through like a divorce with my parents and being in kind of like a party scene where it was like really as a highly sensitive kid, it was really traumatizing. But the way I see it now is it was such a gift to be able to not only go through the intensity of what you experience in an environment such as that, because you come out of it almost like with this type of inner strength and commitment to, I mean, it kind of put me on a path of like wanting to excel in my life. I mean, the shadow of it was I never really wanted to have to experience the vulnerability that I came into contact with, or the pain. Like I didn't really see it as pain at first, because you just kind of think, you grow up thinking that, okay, that's the past, that's over, and I'm gonna move forward, and life moves forward. But that trauma is still in the body, and when you're sensitive, what ends up happening is it constantly revisits with like the same patterns of learning and intensity, and you don't even really realize where it's coming from or why it's happening. And the anxiety and the different types of things that we experience being sensitive, what a gift it was to learn how to self-regulate, emotionally regulate myself.
Right.
Because before that, it was basically I would exercise and I'd hang out with friends that were similar. Like we were kind of protecting each other from having to look at our trauma. And I got into partying, and that seemed to just temporarily just kind of put a Band-Aid onto the trauma that was underlying it all.
I really appreciate what you're saying about the patterns, and how, because I grew up in a situation where my parents were both alcoholics, and with that came a lot of noise for my sensitivity. And I mean, back then I thought it was normal. I thought everybody's family was like that. I didn't really realize that that wasn't quote unquote normal. And it took a lot of strength to navigate those experiences. And it was hard, but definitely the ripple effects of that have showed up through my life in different ways and different layers and relationships. And as much as it's been a struggle, it's also been the birthplace of my greatest gifts as well. So it is that interesting duality of this journey that we're on.
Yeah, totally.
And you mentioned in the book that you discovered breath work as a pathway that was really transformative for you. I wonder what you'd like to say about that.
Yeah, I'd say that was probably one of the most transformational tools that entered my reality. I mean, I grew up as a pretty hardcore skier and athlete that played lots of different sports, and I was always into the gym, so I could relate to breath work and regulation through like movement of the body. And there was kind of like a nervousness, or like it was very difficult to sit still. And at first, when the concept came up where, we're going to go to this woman's place, who's a good friend of ours now, Jessica Bennett, you might know her, and we're going to lay on the ground and breathe as a community.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, why would you breathe all day long, right? Like, why would we want to do that and pay for it on top of it, right?
Right.
And anyways, like, my wife Katie ended up booking us in for a session, and we went. And in the first session, I had a profound experience, and it was just so fascinating how many feelings came to the surface, and how the emotions that were in the body, like for me, like my hands got like they turned into fists, and my shoulders got really tight, and it's like I wanted to scream, but part of me was like, okay, don't scream, because you don't want to like interrupt, or, you know what I mean, because there's an awareness of like not wanting to intrude on other people's space, and all these new kind of concepts. When you're in a space like that, you're not really sure of what's acceptable and what's not.
Yeah.
So it's like, it was interesting because you want to be authentic, but at the same time, you want to honor other people's space.
Mm-hmm.
And coming out of that experience, it was something that I was like fully into. And what was interesting was like the breath work, the regulation part of it, and the ceremony. Like, it was the next like day or two or three afterwards that really fascinated me, because I'd wake up the next day and there would be just like all of like it's like the old state of being, the identities, the belief systems. It would be like sitting on my chest, and I'd feel tired, I'd feel emotional, like grouchy, angry. And I was like, where is this coming from? Right? Just because like breathing can't just like, there's got to be something else that's happening. So I was like really waking up quickly to like how powerful, like when we regulate ourselves, like how powerful those old states come up that want to stay plugged in, right? Or they want to like find a way to climb back into our body, because that's what we know.
Right.
So the more that I breathe, the more I understand that the integration afterwards of being able to get out in nature and move the body, or just lay down and just keep like working through whatever's coming up to the surface. And it's just profound at how that tool can just move like the density in the mountains of our consciousness.
And so what you're speaking to is the fact that the body holds on to all these past experiences that we've had, and the breath helps to move them and surface them.
Yeah. Even to the point where when we lay down to breathe, I mean, some days it's hard to even get breath into the diaphragm. So just laying there and just feeling that shallow breathing and the patterns involved. And then once we kind of like draw breath into the diaphragm and really slow our nervous systems down, there's an opportunity to experience like the story that is actually trapped in the chest. And there's a real chance to not overanalyze the past, but just to like say, okay, I can now see you there, and I'm going to invite you into my inner space so I can learn whatever lessons that still need to be integrated into my life. And if there's nothing, I'm just going to say thank you, and I'm going to let you go.
Right. It's interesting because I too have experienced breath work over the years, mainly when I was in Squamish, and I did a few breath circles, and then I was able to do some one-on-one sessions as well. And I guess if I'm honest, like I had some resistance to it. And as you're speaking right now, it's making me think about I was born a month early. I spent the first month of my life in an incubator. And I just made a connection with that. Like the whole lying on my back to do a breath session physically was a hard thing to do. And I wonder if that's sort of part of it.
Yeah, I'd say I think so. I wrote one of my first stories in Lantern on the Longship about like my birth experience.
Mm-hmm.
It was very, I mean, both me and my mom were close to death,
Yeah.
if not in and out of death. I mean, it was not a ideal situation. But yeah, when I couldn't relax, and the breakthrough that I had was like, oh my God, like I'd never actually processed the fact. Like obviously as an infant, like you can't use the parts of your brain that can remember that, but the body's still holding the trauma. Laying down, it's like, why is my heart beating fast like this? And why do I feel anxious? And why do I feel, and once I understood the medicine of it, it's like, okay, this is where I want to be, because this is where there's the greatest chance for transformation as a human, like emotionally, spiritually, mentally, right? Like to be able to kind of sit and heal all of these different experiences that are like basically like unconscious traumas until we kind of like really go into the vastness of the pain and just accept it.
And I really do believe that the body is always giving us those signs and signals and trying to move us towards something. And yet, if we're moving through life too quickly, which so many of us do because we have to survive, we don't see it, we don't listen to it, we don't hear it. So it's a great way to slow down. And these ways of being can be uncomfortably comfortable, I guess you could say. Like we can habitually stay in them and not realize what's going on.
Totally.
We just accept them as it's accepted as normal, and it's not our original state. And I think that that's one of the things when I met you, it's very clear that you are grounded in yourself and connected to joy and moving through life in a different way. Like you can feel it in your essence. So it's like I can feel that you've done your work. And I see it in your eyes actually as well. This light, this brightness.
No, thank you. A lot of people kind of like approach me with like that and just saying like how are you're such a grounded male, and like, and it's, I'm very truthful, and it's just the only reason that I can find like my center point of inner peace is because like I experience complete chaos.
Right.
And that's the complete honest truth. Like if I hadn't been so far off balance and unregulated, I wouldn't be able to kind of find like be the center of the storm. And it's again, it's like when you can kind of look back and you're in a more healed aspect of yourself, you can look back at these different very places in our lives where we were ashamed or really not happy with the events or the things that were going on. And then we can say, God, thank you for those experiences, because that makes us like what we are right now. If it wasn't for being thrown way off balance, we wouldn't have the chance to experience what inner peace truly is, or even be able to inspire or affect others.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think most of us, and it's part of being young, is it's like when you're unregulated, you do everything you can to hide it.
Right.
Right. I mean, ideally, you'd learn how to talk about it and get it out of the body, so you wouldn't have to hold on to it for 40 years or whatever. But you do everything you can to show the world that, like, I'm a good person.
Right. Yeah.
which we are. But I mean, what I mean, like, you don't want to show that to people because the sensitive part of me never wanted to burden anybody.
Well, that's the original pattern, right? Is because nobody is there really to nurture and support you in a conscious way. And so you're left with all those emotions and experiences to process on your own. So whatever way you need to cope to turn those things off or whatever you need to do, I know I did that. I basically had to stuff it all down. And it wasn't until my late 80s that I went to a mental health presentation and they were talking about anxiety. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's me. That's what I feel all the time. But I had no idea. Like I never could label it. I just thought that that was the way we all felt. even though it was so tremendously uncomfortable, but that was how I moved through the world.
Yeah, and what you said earlier was interesting about how like we associate those unconscious patterns with just being how life is, because in a sense it's all we know. And there was a period of my life like in my early mid 20s where like a lot of my family friends were worried about me having addiction issues with substances,
Yeah.
and I knew that I never did. I mean, I was in the wrong environments, and I could have been making better choices, but I was on the cusp of either a breakdown or a breakthrough. And what I really learned, and I think this is really valuable information, especially for like other males, because like again, we hide our traumas and our states. We can be addicted to the chemistry that's firing within our systems.
Yeah.
And we don't even realize it, but we defend it because if we're bullied as kids or if we have trauma that we haven't dealt with, it stacks up to a point where it's almost like imagine walking into a room and all the papers just fall out.
Sure.
That's kind of like how overwhelmed you can feel when you think, "Oh my God, like I don't even know where to start or what to do with all of that stuff." And then even from thinking about it, it fires this cascade of like inner chemistry that comes to life, and it's like focused on like the lower chakras, and there's like fear and the like not wanting to fail or let people down, and there's all these continuous themes that just keep rotating around and around and around in these similar themes, and it leads to frustration because obviously you're in a loop and you want to get out of it. And as we continually resist, it keeps getting stronger and stronger and stronger until, I mean, I don't know. I felt like eventually I broke, which was like beautiful because
Hmm.
when you break, you rebuild yourself.
Yeah. It's so one of my medicines has been psilocybin over the years and doing guided journeys with others and individual journeys for myself. And I always say that that saved me thousands of dollars in therapy. And but there's some similar themes to your experiences of breath work. One of the things that happened for me was in these community journeys, like I would become so self-conscious of my impact on the room. And just like you described, that was the experience because that was how I would move through life, was just to not make noise and to not affect others and not be in my power. And anyway, it showed up in all sorts of ways. And I remember this one journey where I met up with a guide. I still don't know what it was or who it was or gender or anything like that. It was really obscure. But the message was that everything that I experienced and continue to experience was a beautiful problem. In other words, it's, on one hand, it's painful and it's hard to go through. But on the other side, it's like this beautiful journey that creates this outcome of strength and gifts and all these things. And that we need both in order to find that middle road. And it sounds like you're speaking to those things as well.
Yeah, no, totally. It's totally true. If when we're in trauma or going through a difficult time in our lives, if we flip the story that we tell ourselves, oftentimes we have the skills and we have the tools, even though we don't think we do, to deal with everything.
Yeah.
And it's oftentimes like it's the stories we learn in our first like 7 to 10 years, I want to say. Our subconscious is very pliable and we're absorbing everything like a sponge. So I feel like now being challenged in my life at in my mid 40s to close to 50 is going through like some of the most challenging things I've experienced in my life, and the story changes and the treasure of what could potentially come from the challenges arises straight through. Like what I mean, it's like we change the story, we change our lives.
Right. We change the reflection of what we see in the world as well, because everything is a ripple in time of our past experiences wanting to be released. And it's just like layer upon layer, right? We're waxing out the layers that we've experienced over time.
and they keep coming back. I mean, when I was younger, I used to think like if I do enough work, like all the pain and all this strange like energy will go away and I'll just be good. Right? Like I think that's just part of like the being young and stuff like that. And then it was like a real big blessing when I started to understand that every day when I wake up, the same energies are still there. I just have a choice as to how I want to direct my life force. I can meet with that resistance and the imbalances and the different things that show up in my reality, and I don't have to energize it. You know what I mean? And that understanding alone brings a lot of my like creative power back to the present moment. And then I can choose to like share this energy with helping my kids grow up and empowering them, going out and working with people in gyms and in meeting people in breathwork and markets and things like that, and actually like being somebody that can hold space and be grounded in these environments.
And that's the opposite of all the shadow work, is that your light gets to be expressed again, and shine that out into the world, into all these things that you do. And I think that that's really an important thing to mention, is like the relationship you have with your children, and the relationship you have with your partner, and the work that you both do together. Like you're doing so much and creating all your own products and working the land and staying connected to nature. Like you've been able to create a life that has all of those elements and is so nurturing to you, and also nurtures everyone around you that you impact as well.
Yeah, I know that's really the dream, is to just wake up every day. It's a clean slate.
Right.
Tell a lot of my clients that is like, look, every time you wake up, it's a completely clear slate. There's no past, there's no future. So if we can begin by just regulating ourselves, whatever that looks like, if we just sit down, close our eyes, and it doesn't have to be a ceremony, but it can be our own ceremonial process of just honoring our life force and our breath, slowing down and then entering the day, right, on this clean slate, regulated, instead of running out the door with like our rocket blasters on our back.
Right. I mean, I think
Right?
back to all the years I worked in restaurants, and I mean, I would literally like be burning the candle at both ends, and I would wake up half an hour before I had to be somewhere. Like I was just running through life. And often I would wake up just dreading the day and what was waiting for me. And I'm so grateful that at this phase in my life, like there's never a day that I wake up dreading anything. I'm waking up excited for the day or peaceful as I enter the day. And a lot of that is because I prioritize myself first, and connect with myself first, and I don't rush out the door anymore. So it's like that's the shift that we go through when we turn the dial.
Yeah, once we understand, like once we make the unconscious conscious and understand that like I love the shadow work. I love being able to go into like the darkness and shine light.
Hmm.
And I feel like it's I'm so good at seeing the outcome of the possibilities of what can come from that type of work. I mean, just I love quantum physics. It's just
Hmm.
understanding that when we do this work, it affects the entire universe, the entire planet. It affects our entire lineage or genetics. Right? We determine how our genes start to express themselves. Like there's all, and that which is a template for future humanity or what we could possibly become if we live a parasympathetic connected life, right? Like these things are fascinating to me. So when I wake up in them, I'm never just thinking about like my own journey per se. I'm looking at the whole collective of what we could do as a planet and how much our individual gifts and energies and the way we show up impacts. That's fascinating. That makes me like really excited to keep on growing and healing.
And what would you like to say about multidimensionality and quantum physics? Because it definitely is an important piece of your puzzle. And it's also, to me, it's like I think of like I've learned so much about human design and stepped into the gene keys. And the more I get into that, the more I think, wait a second, is this like a simulation, or like what are we actually living here? And I feel like you would have something to say about that as well.
Yeah, God, there's a lot to talk about here. I mean, I feel that when we can shift our brainwaves and once we understand how to like lay on our backs and like move into like delta, let's say, when we get good, where we can really just fall into the dream state and be conscious there,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like that's what I believe connects us to time space travel, that allows us to like bend the laws of this third dimensional reality, because we're presented with this is how it works, this is, and I believe like none of that is true, because once we tap into the intelligence of the body, we can have access to the entire library of the cosmos. And like you were saying, the gene keys, the cards of destiny, there's all these different modalities that are allowing us to kind of like tap into the symbols or the archetypes of this collective, and being able to kind of decipher and navigate and bring more conscious awareness into our day-to-day realities. And I feel like as kids, we're not taught about the guidance, that the connections we have to our higher self, and the amount of guidance and protection and support that's available to us. And it's not just one person, it's not just shamans, it's not just people that do the work. This is all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And I really strongly believe that when we can change our brainwaves and move into coherence, like we have a direct channel that connects to every aspect of who and what we are on every single level, dimensionally, energetically, right? Like it reaches, there's no limits. And we just have to believe that that's a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
And once we believe in that possibility, we can go deep into our meditative practice and not only ground ourselves and bring ourselves to complete presence, but also explore the vast energies that we are on so many different levels.
And do you think that the experience of those things, a lot of people refer to it as the veil that keeps us separate from that reality, is that by design, or have we been intentionally kept from these gifts or taken away from these gifts?
I think it's a combination of both. To be able to discover that we're basically sparks of the source by forgetting everything, and being able to integrate and grow and see what we can do in these physical forms, that's pretty awesome. And I know like a lot of people go into the real dark areas about us being trapped here or being manipulated and almost like suppressed and things like that. I mean, it all comes down to a choice. Like if we look at it that way, then that's kind of true, right? But if we also look at the opportunities of we could be anywhere in the world in any situation, and we can still choose to be free. And then once we move in that direction, that we can break past the senses, and rather than feeling like we're being victimized, right, we can empower ourselves and learn to find joy and happiness and love ourselves and love the people that come into our environments. Then we break the entire web of the matrix, right? And it's all a choice. And if, as long as we think, because I grew up thinking we're in a matrix and we're trapped, we've been effed over. And what I mean, like it was like I was a real rebel.
Yep.
And to the point where it was like I was looking for ways to, like, you want to be the part of the team that decimates it.
Right.
Then you wake up one day and realize that that energy is just feeding the same force that we think we're fighting against.
Mm-hmm.
Until we find peace and love as more of a collective, we're going to keep animating these energies that are supposedly in charge of suppressing us. But I don't believe that.
And that's the quantum physics layer, because like attracts like. So what we put our attention on is what we attract.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's interesting, because there's a lot of, you mentioned the lower chakras, fear, guilt, and shame. And we've been experiencing a lot of fear in our culture over the last while, and rising above that and being in our hearts is really the best medicine for that. But it's hard to create from those lower centers that when they're activated, and we are in those states of fear. So shifting that it takes presence, it takes consciousness to be able to be in those states and to rise above them.
Yeah, it takes some time, like you said, practice to be able to play in density, and then realizing that the playing in the density actually transmutes it into, you turn rocks into feathers.
Yeah.
And I feel like more and more of us are starting to kind of like completely transform the stories we were telling ourselves as kids about how limited we were, or how stuck, or how we are the way we are because of, the victimhood. I feel is really under a lens right now, the victimhood consciousness. And it's really as the earth is going through this like rapid transformation, and there's all this new light coming from the source and the cosmos and the moon, the suns, doing all kinds of wild things. It's really putting the pressure on us to learn how to navigate into more of a state of joy.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I mean, the other option is if we stay stuck in the same perceptions, then we experience the density in our bodies really quickly nowadays. I feel like we're in a place of real pioneering right now.
And we maybe don't even realize it in some ways. We're just continuing to push through. And one of the things I love about Vancouver Island is the amount of metaphysical community and spiritual community. Like you can't turn around without meeting someone that is in alignment. It's really great.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's such a magical place.
Yeah, and I spent 4 years in the Okanagan, and I was literally drying up there. I mean, I loved it. It was nice, a great experience, but I was kind of drying up. And when I came to the island, I realized why, because I was missing that spiritual connection and spiritual community, and to be able to find it and to connect with it immediately was really great.
Oh, totally. I think a lot of us were living on like the mainland or different parts of Canada and things. Like a lot of people that I meet, and it was around like we moved to the island in 2016.
Okay.
And there's a lot of people that came here at that time. So
Mm-hmm.
there was definitely some shifts of like, even to the point where a lot of us were saying that like if you're meant to be here, that then things are going to happen in your life that are going to just catapult you here.
Yeah, it's true. I literally had a whisper that said, go back to the island. Because I had been here in 2012 for a year and a half, a bit of a hero's journey with a relationship that was quite challenging. And step one was to get off the island eventually. And so to be called back was an interesting experience to go through.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah. So tell me about the importance of your connection to nature.
Oh, I feel like nature is like probably my most powerful medicine of my whole life. I feel that just simply being outside in bare feet, like not even doing anything, like on a beach listening to the ocean, there is a simplicity and a connection that's happening on so many levels that is just nourishing us and bringing us back into balance. And there's no need to know what's happening or why it's happening, or it's just happening. And for me, when I'm out in nature, when I was living in a city, I really could feel myself, like you said, drying out, being ungrounded, and not being able to really find kind of my center point. And then once I moved to the island and got like onto our land and got a chance to really like anchor myself back into like wild water and ocean, and it was like a butterfly coming out of a cocoon. I mean, it was like a complete rebirth to what I already knew, because as a kid, that's all I did was play outside. We didn't have like the technology and stuff like that. I grew up in Prince George, so it was like a real, at the time, it was real more remote and lots of forest and snow. And So I knew that was medicine. And then, you grow up in a city wanting to make something of yourself. And we were building gyms and, we kind of wanted to help provide services that could help change the world and help people. And you get kind of caught up in that. And you realize that when you come out the other end and you're back in nature, that as kids we're like highly intelligent. You regulate yourself through just being out in the open air.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it was 2011, somewhere in there. I was working for Starbucks, and I basically, it was around Christmas time. I walked up to the door, grabbed the handle to go into work, and I recognized, I was like, I can't do this anymore. And what came next was a leave of absence. And a lot of that was just walking slowly in nature, just really reconnecting with, because as a boy, I used to do that a lot. I'd walk my dog and walk up creeks and make my own trail. And it reconnected me to that part that was so important. And it was such a powerful reflection. Nature is such a great teacher.
Yeah, totally. I feel like something that is really valuable that came onto my path, and I feel like Dr. Joe Dispenza talks a lot about this, is how our emotions are like magnets.
Mm,
And when we're in nature, like we're emotionally, eventually, right? Nature kind of has its way of allowing us to regulate ourselves emotionally. So then we draw more pleasurable experiences to ourselves, our relationships lighten up, we meet friendlier people. I mean, that's like the island's kind of like that because everybody's kind of out in nature. So we're all regulating ourselves in ways without having to kind of like think we're putting in the work. You know what I mean?
hmm Yeah.
And once I understood that, then like I went from not having an understanding of emotional regulation to really making it like a priority in my life. And it completely changes your reality. And it doesn't take long. I mean, it's daunting at first sitting with like these uncomfortable feelings, but once you see, if you can look at the outcome and say, what the outcome of this is going to be a happier life, which is going to lead to like doing work that's more in line with our like destiny or our passion, and with friends that actually we can be authentic with and really open up to. These are all the outcomes of doing the emotional work. But so many of us are not wanting to go there because it makes, I mean, in the old way of thinking, when I don't want to be perceived as weak or emotional, or like there's all these things as like growing up as a guy where you don't really want to show those parts.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's something as males, I feel like we all have to like reorganize what we perceive as being strong means.
And that actually leads me to an interesting question that I wanted to ask about. You mentioned instilling discipline in the book. And I feel like that is an important tag on to what you just said about the way men are, and but discipline has such an interesting connotation to it. I think we think about it as being disciplined by somebody. And yet on the other side of that, it's like when we bring discipline into our life, it can lead to so many positive things. So what would you want to say about discipline in your life?
I would say that it's one of the greatest virtues we can build.
Hmm.
And I mean, a good example is if we want to, let's say, get into the medicine of moving our bodies more with a healthier mind. And when we look at that process, we can visualize every cell in our body opening up like a vacuum cleaner and being able to absorb nutrients and lights and water and come to life, and we can reinvent ourselves cellularly. So when we discipline ourselves as athletes, we force ourselves to do things because we know we need to be better. There's that old paradigm of discipline. And I feel like there's a lot of medicine in saying, what, like, let's revisit, like, what it means to move the body, of what it means to, like, grab a weight or a tool. And when we touch it, it's like a magical lantern, like a genie lantern, that, oh my God, I can touch this and I can like close my eyes and visualize like my cells scream, like singing in ecstasy. And see, what I'm trying to say is that like we can force ourselves to do things and it leads us to like points of learning that prevent us from like eating healthier and wanting to kind of go to the gyms or do activities because we associate it with being painful. And yeah, just that little mind play of being able to use the imagination and looking at it as in new and creating new possibilities. Then we start doing things and disciplining ourselves, and it becomes more fun and something we want to be doing instead of something we're forcing ourselves to do.
I can relate to that because over the last, well, I think after returning to the island, I really just stepped into walking a lot. And as I was less busy, I would walk like 3 times a day. I was like, I just wanted to keep walking. I loved it. And yet there was a time maybe 5 years ago where I couldn't even imagine going for a 10-minute walk because it felt like too much. I was working full time. I just didn't really feel like I had the energy and it felt like work. So I think you're suggesting that a level of discipline and bringing some creative energy to it, it allows you to get into that flow. Today I had one walk and I wish I could have had 2 more, right? It's just, but I couldn't imagine myself being like that, but I actually just love it now. It's just such a big, important part of my day.
Yeah, totally. And then when there's like the outcome of how you feel afterwards, like one of my favorite activities is I have a like a sandbag, and it's quite heavy and it's like it's daunting to kind of think about it for me, but I love it because it's like humbling. Whenever I'm using it, it never feels like I'm like doing a very good job. So it's a real chance to kind of like meet that part of myself and say, you know what, this is like, think of the benefits this is happening to the metabolism and the ways that your muscles are being challenged on so many levels that reach beyond like just your typical workout. So it's a chance to reparent myself in that aspect when it's super hard and grueling, and still be able to connect it to an outcome. And then at the end, the medicine is you basically release all those old paradigms and belief systems and everything else, because basically the sandbag just presses it out of me.
Right. Which is a metaphor for what life does to us as well, if we're willing and conscious to it.
Totally.
Yeah. So, Darrell, that feels like a good place to press pause. I always close by asking the same question, which is, and I feel like you've answered it throughout the whole conversation, but let's see what your one thing you can say is. What's one simple way someone could connect with the sacred today?
Sitting down, closing your eyes, maybe going out in nature and doing this, just bare feet in the grass or in the sand, and taking some long, slow, deep breaths. Not just a certain number, but taking enough of them so that the air goes into the belly and into the heart, and it starts to kind of like move. I think of the waves of the ocean, right? The ocean waves come in. There's a right, and then you do enough of that, and that's like some of the best medicine that we have access to, and it's the key to life. I mean, it's right in our little wheel box of this like system we have.
Yeah, it's always with us.
Always with us, and it's so amazing that we don't even realize it, how powerful and important it is, until it helps us navigate through difficulties in our lives. A real powerful ally.
Totally. I love that. Thank you, Darrell.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. I so appreciated our conversation and all the places that we went. And I'm sure that our listeners are going to love some of the journeys that we took. And I appreciate you taking the time for the conversation. And it's been such a gift.
Amazing. Thank you, Russ.
You're very welcome. And we will connect at some point soon. Thank you for joining us on Sacred Sundays. I hope something in today's offering spoke to your spirit, stirred something true, or simply gave you a moment to breathe. If this conversation resonated, please subscribe, rate, or share. It truly helps this work reach the people who are meant to find it. If you'd like to step inside my world a little further, I host a free live practice 3 mornings a week called Start With You. Just 20 minutes on Zoom to return to your own energy. Everything you need can be found at the link in the show notes. Until next time, may your day be slow and sacred.